Hello everyone. Today our subject is fundamentals of IoT. In this third unit, we are going to learn about Raspberry Pi. Okay. In this lecture on the introduction to Raspberry Pi, you will learn about what Raspberry Pi is and what are different functions and of Raspberry Pi, and more importantly about why Raspberry Pi is so important in the development of IoT. Okay. So move on to the next slide. Okay. See, what is Raspberry Pi? What we required. So computer in your palm, single board computer with a low cost and easy to access. Okay. See, a Raspberry Pi is compared to, when we compared with Arduino, it's more powerful. It is more powerful in terms of computation of processing processor power. Additionally, it has better memory capacity, and also it can integrate different types of sensors, actuators, and this part is more attractive than compared to the similar kind of feature of Arduino. So we can do different types of sensors integration in Raspberry Pi, and due to the feature that is can process more compared to Arduino. So it is better processing capabilities and more features on it. So this practically attractive for sensors which have like more required processing. For example, imaging sensors, multimedia, different types of multimedia sensors which integrate more processing that we know. So in the same way, when we talk about Arduino based IoT node, here also we have using Raspberry Pi. Okay, we can have Raspberry Pi enabled IoT node and IoT. This IoT node would be more powerful compared to Arduino based node. Additionally, we have to keep in mind that although it has better capabilities, but it comes at more cost and more purchasing of Raspberry Pis. So it's cost effective. It's more costly. So Arduino is, in general, they use Arduino. So there is a trade-off for course. There is a trade-off, of course. However, it will depends upon the requirements. If the requirement of the particular IoT application that has been developed to have some different nodes which you can serve than Raspberry Pi would be better option than Arduino. So second thing is that you know that Raspberry Pi configure Raspberry Pi as a web server. You can even configure Raspberry Pi as an edge device and so on. So there are different capabilities that are there, but at the same time, you know, more computation means more power consumption. So if you have the same kind of application with the more power consumption requirements, so that it's not so good. So if that is a problem, then you know one can go for Raspberry Pi. So this particular issue is a little bit tricky because there are certain scenarios where Arduino can also come to be beneficial with respect to this. Okay. So in some situations or in some cases where based on the requirements, we would go for Arduino. Okay. In some situations where we are like in particular situations when we want to use, then we for that particular task or for particular requirements, we'll go with the Raspberry Pi. So today in this lecture, you can see this. It is basically a micro-sized computer and are commonly said to be a computer in your palm. More specifically, it is a single board computer, which is very low cost device and which is very, very accessible. So these are one of the main reasons these are of some main reasons why Raspberry Pi has become so popular with respect to IoT as well as hobby electronics people. Okay, there are different specifications available. Okay, like different models and different Raspberry Pis available in order to use according to your requirement. Okay, there are various varieties of Raspberry Pi, like Raspberry Pi model A, Raspberry Pi model B. Okay, each Raspberry Pi model will have different configurations, different capabilities and all, storing capabilities like that. Okay, so coming to the next slide, that is basic architecture. So in this basic functional architecture of Raspberry Pi, at the center you have CPU or GPU. You have various input output ports connected to it. You have a RAM, you have a USB. Okay, you have RAM and USB, and now USB hub, which you can you can connect on Ethernet or using USB ports. Okay, which can you connect regular USB devices. So in short, this is the thing in a simpler to understand the what is normal PC, right? It looks like normal PC only, right? So Raspberry Pi GIO. Okay, GPIO. Raspberry GPIO in general purpose input output. What is GPIO? It is a general purpose input output. For we are calling it as like it stands for general purpose input outputs. So they act as both the digital output as well as digital input. It is quite similar to your input and output digital input signals like pins when we use Arduino board, right? If you can see that Arduino board, if you can remember, there are like input pins and output pins for digital inputs and outputs, right? Similarly, here also you will be having digital input and output pins. These pins are a bit confused, so I have included one chart, okay, describing the pin configurations over here. These two pins, okay, these two pins will have 5-volt power pins and black one over here to the ground pin, and the remaining are GPIO, which is input output pins. Okay, so you have to consider that certain GPIO pins which act as a quite text or read. So either for reading or writing it, that means transmission or for reception. These are normal GPI pins, which is used for configuring the elements. So the basic set of USB, like basic setup for Raspberry Pi is, we required HDMI cable, monitor, keyboard, mouse, 5-volt power adapter for Raspberry Pi, LAN cable, and minimum 2 GB micro SD card. So we'll come up to the setup this. Okay, as we know that as we have seen the requirements, right? Now we'll see the operating system. Okay, so we'll come up with the setup, and a bit later will I will demonstrate how to set up the whole system. Okay, so regarding the operating system, certain official bitwise or for Raspberry Pi or Raspberry noobs and some third-party OS which can also be installed on the Raspberry Pi, like Ubuntu, Windows, and so on. Many operating system like OSs can be installed onto this Raspberry Pi. Okay. We can see here some of the third-party organizations are Ubuntu Mac, Windows, Pinet, RISC OS, Snappy Ubuntu Core. These are all different third-party OS. So now Raspberry Pi setup. Download Raspberry Pi. You can download Raspberry Pi directly from here, unzip the file and end up the .image file. Now you have to set up the OS part. Okay. So first we'll write Raspberry Pi and SD card, install Windows 32 disk imager, so, that is a software in a Windows machine, run it, plug in STD, SD card to your PC and select the device, browse the image, okay, browse that image file and then write the code. So this is how you are going to set up. Okay. Now basic install configuration. Now basic installation configuration is enable SSH. Step 1 is open command prompt and type sudo raspi configure and press enter. So first step what we have to do, open the command prompt and type sudo raspi config and press enter. And the second step is navigate to SSH in the advanced option. And setup 3 is enable SSH. See, basic install configuration. This is how we'll be doing. Okay. Advanced, you're going to select this advanced options. Under that, you're going to select A4 SSH. Okay. So after selecting, these are the steps, right? As we have seen, like expand file system, open command prompt and sudo raspi configure and press enter. Then second step is navigate to expand file system. You have to navigate it so to that expand file system and then finally press enter to expand it. Okay. See, this is how we're going to select it. Now coming to this programming, as we have seen what are the requirements, okay, what are the operating systems and how we are going to set up that, and then coming to this program. Default installed. That means like you can write the programming in any of these languages like Python, C, C++, Java, Sketch, Ruby, anything. So the note here is any language that will compile for ARM v6 version 6 can be used with Raspberry Pi. Okay. So the popular examples or popular applications are Media Streamer, Home Automation Controlling BOT, VPN, Lightweight Web Server for IoT, Tablet, Computer. Okay. So these are different applications that we are going to use this Raspberry Pi. Okay. So we'll discuss each and every thing in detail, not examples. We'll have like blinking light and a camera, how this camera can be used in terms of like Raspberry Pi. Like if you have Raspberry Pi, inserting or using this camera or inserting that to that Raspberry Pi, and how we are integrating those two and how we are able to capture those images with the Raspberry Pi by writing a program, by giving instructions. So we'll see each and everything in detail in the next lecture. Thank you.